إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Praise be to Allah. We seek His help and His forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil of our own souls and from our bad deeds. Whomsoever Allah guides will never be led astray, and whomsoever Allah leaves astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, the one having no partner, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his slave and messenger. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. O my Lord, open up my heart and make my task easy, and loosen the knot from my tongue so that they may fully understand my speech. رب هب لي حكما وألحقني بالصالحين واجعل لي لسان صدق في الآخرين واجعلني من ورثة جنة النعيم. My Lord, grant me wisdom, join me with the righteous, give me a good name among later generations, and make me of those given the garden of bliss. Okay, so Assalamu alaikum everyone. Over the past few weeks, we have been introducing the topic of Tafseer. We've done it very slowly. We've stepped into time and we looked a little bit into the history of Islam and the social setting of Arabia during the time that the Quran was revealed. We realized that the Arabs were masters in the Arabic language and that they would compete in presenting amazing pieces of writing, which made it so suitable for the Quran to be a miracle for the Arabs, because it was a book which outdid their works in Arabic and poetry. And we also briefly discussed things like why verses were revealed in segments, like in little parts and not all at once, and how it was all for a wise purpose. It was to help the new Muslims grow into their faith, because they need time to get used to the laws and Islam. And it was to encourage the non-Muslims to actually look into Islam rather than run away from it. Because if the whole Quran with all its laws and legislations was revealed all at once, it would not encourage people to become Muslim. It would scare them out of fear of change. And finally, we looked at the difference between the Meccan and the Medinan chapters. And now that you have a brief understanding of Tafseer, you are, inshallah, officially ready to learn about the Tafseer of the shorter chapters of the Quran. So since I'll be starting with the Fatiha, because remember we briefly touched on that, even though the fact that the Fatiha is not from the Juzz Amma, and this is a Juzz Amma course, we are going to be starting with the Fatiha because it is a surah that we're reciting many, many times a day. And our salah is not acceptable without Surah Al-Fatiha. It needs to be said. So this is why I'll be starting with this surah before I go to the other side of the Quran, Juz number 30, and starting with Juz Amma. I will be taking it very slow, not as slow as the way that I learned it. The way I learned the tafsir, it was maybe 10 times as slow as this, but I feel that for this class, it's not suitable to do it, to allow the lessons to take that long. So for example, Surah Al-Fatiha with its number of verses may take 2 weeks, whereas if you did it in a very slow-paced course, a very detailed course, it might actually take a term to do Surah Al-Fatiha. So considering that I am taking it slowly, but not that slowly, I would like everyone to take it upon themselves to start memorizing the surahs that I teach. And I want you to memorize it not just as a surah that you just have to memorize how to say it, but I need you to memorize their meanings, for that's the ultimate purpose of this course. The purpose of this course is that you memorize these short surahs to make your salah more exciting and beautiful and refreshing, but it's also for you to actually know what you are saying, inshallah. So here we go, inshallah. So Surah Al-Fatiha, okay, is a Meccan chapter, okay, and it contains 7 verses, and it's known by many names. So there are surahs in the Quran that have more than one name, and this is one of them. Okay, it's known as Kitab, which means the mother of the book. Some of these, just so you know, the main points that I'm saying are on the slides. I would recommend that you write down the main points of these slides and then add any extra points that are really important. But I've added the main points to these slides. So it's known as Kitab, which means the mother of the book. Muslim recorded that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever performs any prayer in which he did not read Quran, then his prayer is incomplete. And he said this 3 times. So the Fatiha is a requirement for every single unit of, the Salah, and reciting another chapter is not obligatory, but it is recommended. So if you did, recite, for example, only Surah Al-Fatiha in your Salah is still valid. But, the Sunnah is to recite more than one chapter. It's also called Al-Fatiha, which means the opening, because it's the first chapter of the Quran. So literally when you open the Quran, what you see is Surah Al-Fatiha. That's why it's called the opening. It's called Al-Hamd because half of the Surah Al-Fatiha revolves around praising Allah, and the word Hamd, you learn, you'll learn about the meaning of this word, which means praising and gratitude. It's also called As-Salah because reciting it is a condition of the prayer. It's called Al-Ruqya, which is the remedy, since the chapter is recited over the one who is ill, and it was recited over the tribal chief who was poisoned as a means of remedy. So you recite this surah over someone to cure them from an illness. It's called Ash-Shifa, which is very similar. It's the cure because the recitation of this chapter over the sick will help cure them. So a lot of people think that if someone is sick, you have to recite the whole Quran over them, or, very large portions of the Quran. But it's actually not as hard as that. You just need to know the short surahs, such as Surah Al-Fatiha and the 3 Quls. It is the most repeated surah due to it being recited in every single rak'ah in Salah. So, if you prayed only what is obligatory in your Salah, okay, so just say you didn't pray any sunnah praise and you only recited and you only did your Fajr 2 rak'at, Dhuhr 4 rak'at, you didn't do anything extra, you'll be reciting Surah Al-Fatiha 17 times. So if you prayed even more rak'at, then you'll be reciting way more than 17 times. So in general, when we repeat something, it means that it is very important to us and it becomes part of our lifestyle. So the Fatiha is supposed to be part of your everyday life. And soon you're going to actually learn why that this surah is in particular needs to be recited so many times. It's recited so many times because of this. Okay, so the first verse we're going to look at is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Okay, which means in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. So all chapters of the Quran, other than Surah At-Tawbah, which also has the name Surah Al-Bara'ah, it begins with Allah's name, and it begins with this statement, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. There is a difference of opinion among the scholars whether that basmala, so when I say the word basmala, it just means Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That's what the basmala means. So there's a difference of opinion whether the basmala is actually considered the first verse of Fatiha, or whether it's simply the statement before the first verse. Just like all the other chapters of the Quran, we've got Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and then we've got verse number 1. But the scholars actually differ whether the first verse is actually Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim or not, or it's just, the statement, just like other surahs. Okay, and we're actually going to discuss that later. The 2 names mentioned of Allah that I mentioned in this are also going to be discussed in verse number 3. Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, because they are mentioned in verse number 3. Allah mentioning his name at the beginning of chapters, it indicates that everyone needs to start a good action or a speech with the name of Allah. So what you learn here is Allah is, that statement, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, is mentioned before a chapter of the Quran, or it's part of the Surah Al-Fatiha. What this is trying to teach us is that before you do anything, always mention Allah's name before you do anything. So it's recommended to mention the name of Allah before doing any action. Okay, as the Prophet ﷺ said, when any of you wants to eat, he should mention the name of Allah at the beginning. He said, say Bismillah. If he forgets to say at the beginning, then he should say Bismillahi awwalihi wa akhirihi, which means I begin with the name of Allah at the beginning and at the end. Okay, so you don't have to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You could just say Bismillah, for example. Mentioning the name of Allah, when you do that, you fulfill 3 things. So you've done 3 things when you say Bismillah or Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, it invokes the blessing of Allah upon that deed. So, subhanallah, we want the blessing of Allah on us when we do something. So I'll give you an example of something where there's no blessing. Sometimes someone is very rich, but they feel that they are poor. Like they will get money, but then they'll lose it straight away, or they'll have no financial way of managing their money. So they have a lot of money, but they feel like that they're poor because there's no barakah in it. Or everyone has 24 hours in the day. Some people do so much in that 24 hours, and some people feel like that time really, really flew and you got literally nothing done. Why? Because there was no barakah, no blessing in your time. So if we want Allah to bless our time, we should start every day in every action with the name of Allah. That way, inshallah, your actions will be blessed, your money will be blessed, your children will be blessed, your house will be blessed. Everything that you have will feel like you're getting the most out of it. Another good reason why we should mention the name of Allah is because it wards off evil, especially from the shaitan. The shaitan, he runs away from the remembrance of Allah. When he hears the adhan, he runs away. When the recitation of the Quran is recited in the house, the shaitan runs away. So when you mention the name of Allah, it gives you blessing and it wards off the evil and the shayateen. Now let's look. So I hope, inshallah, you will be able to memorize the meaning of that. Okay. So verse number 2. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Now, before we begin with this next verse, it's a good time to mention that Surah Al-Fatiha is actually split into 2 parts, because now you'll notice that when I'm looking at this verse and another few verses, it's actually going to be 2 topics. So there's going to be a few verses that mention one main theme or topic, and then the next part is mentioning something else, and I'll mention it. So the first half is actually related to what Allah is describing about himself. So there are a few of his names mentioned. So Allah first describes who he is in the first couple of the verses, and he's actually introducing himself to you, and it allows you to learn a little bit about the person who you're worshipping. You want to know who you are dedicating so much time and effort towards. When we pray, we don't just do it and we don't really know who we're praying towards. We don't really know who he is. You want to know how powerful he is, what kind of names and attributes that he has. And then the next part of Surah Al-Fatiha is when the servant is asking Allah for help, mainly for guidance. So we need to keep that in mind when I'm explaining each verse. The first part of Surah Al-Fatiha is describing Allah. The next part of Surah Al-Fatiha is us asking Allah, the one that we just learned about, for help. Okay, keep this in mind, inshallah. So in this verse, Alhamdu lillahi Rabbil Alameen, I stressed on the word Alhamdu because it means praise. It actually means more than that. So I know off the screen I wrote Alhamdu means all praise, but it actually combines more than that. So the word Hamd combines 2 meanings. It combines praise and it combines gratitude. Okay. In English, it's a little bit hard to explain, because in English we only have praise, we only have thanks, we have different words. In English, one can have, you can praise a person without thanking him, can't you? Can't you praise a person for something but you don't thank them? For example, okay, you can praise the beauty of a car. So you can say, oh, wow, how beautiful this car is. But does that mean now you've thanked your car for its efforts? No, you haven't. You see a beautiful mountain and you praise its beauty. SubhanAllah, how beautiful that mountain is. You've praised it. But on the other hand, you might actually thank a person, but it doesn't actually necessarily mean you're praising them. For example, your mum cooks you a dish, okay, dinner, and it's not really that delicious. It's not as tasty as you imagined it to be. And you say thank you because, you want to thank her for the effort because, she did stay in the kitchen for an hour or so, but you didn't praise her for the meal being tasty. So sometimes someone has harmed you sometimes, but they've done you a favor. So you thank them for the favor that they've done for you, but you don't praise them for their ill treatment towards you. For example, when Musa went to Fir'aun was enraged and he reminded him that, hey, I raised you up. You lived in my house and you are under my care. And now here you are, you're trying to say that I'm not God. So Musa actually acknowledged the favor that Fir'aun did for him by allowing him to live in his palace. And he actually thanked him for letting him live in his house and raising him. But he didn't praise Fir'aun because Fir'aun was not doing anything worthy of praise. Another example is Allah reminding Ibrahim to be grateful to his parents for the favor that they did by raising him. They fed him, they clothed him, they gave him shelter, but he wasn't required to praise his dad because Ibrahim actually was a person who used to carve statues and sell them, and he was an idol worshipper. This is Prophet Ibrahim's father. So Prophet Ibrahim was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to actually thank his father for raising him, for providing him food and shelter, but for thanking him, but for not praising him because he wasn't doing anything worthy of praise. He just needed to thank him. So keep that in mind, okay? And just remind yourself that Ibrahim's father wasn't even a Muslim, and he's not even following the same religion. But we need to be kind to our parents and show them thanks, even if they are not Muslim. And the only thing that we're not allowed to follow their orders is when they ask you to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if your parent, whether they're a practicing Muslim or a disbeliever, if they ask you for a favor, for something, can you drop me off here? Can you pick me up there? Can you do this? We are supposed to be, listening and being obedient because they're not asking us to do something that is forbidden. So the word hamd combines and infuses both meanings of praise and gratitude in a single word. And that's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he deserves both praise and thanks, and not only one of them. So he deserves both. And we thank him for the blessings that he gave us. And we praise him for his qualities, his abilities, his kindness. And this is the most appropriate word to use with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what hamd is. It combines praise and gratitude. And something worth noting is that in Arabic, you can explain something that takes 2 words or an entire sentence to explain in English. So, and that's why at times you'll see a very short verse written in Arabic, yet it would take 3 times the amount of words to actually translate it. If you open up the Quran and you see like a very short verse, you'll notice it actually takes many more words to translate it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he loves to be praised. And in this verse, the servant is praising Allah. We are praising Allah. When we say Alhamdulillah, we're praising and thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have been blessed with countless blessings. I want you to think of some things that you have that people don't have. And I'm not only referring here to wealth or maybe a husband or children. Think about other things, because maybe you're not blessed with a husband or a high income or a beautiful home, but think of some things that you have that other people don't have. Not everyone has sight. Not everyone is able to walk. So imagine if you didn't, have these blessings. So say Alhamdulillah for your countless blessings. And we cannot possibly count them all. It's not actually possible to count all the blessings. Many blessings, people take it for granted. And the servant doesn't remember consciously to thank Allah for all these blessings. Like being able to see, and the rest of your 5 senses. Close your eyes, okay? And imagine that the blessing of sight has been taken away you just for a minute. Or put a peg over your nose, okay? Or use your hand, cover your nose, and imagine not being able to smell anything, okay? The fresh air, the aroma of that beautiful food. Imagine that there was a gas leak in your house and you didn't know about the gas because you couldn't smell it. So not everyone has been blessed with the ability to hear and to see and to smell and to touch. There are people that are paralyzed. So because we don't remember to thank Allah for all the blessings, we're too busy to remember. So Allah reminds us 17 times in Surah Al-Fatiha to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's telling us who He is and to praise Him. So the servant of Allah, and you are all servants of Allah, you need to remind yourself, don't overlook these blessings. Rather, be constantly looking at those who have. Don't always look at those who have more than you, but look at those who have less than you. Actually, studies have shown that exhibiting gratitude is associated with happiness, triggered by having a stronger sense of appreciation for reward and kindness received. So we are reciting words of praise to Allah every day in our salah, reminding ourselves that there's so much to be grateful for. People who are generally grateful for people's acts of kindness are more likely to appreciate the acts of kindness of their creator. So if you're not generally the type of person, you find it really hard to verbalize your thanks. Some people find it very hard to say thank you. If your child, for example, always thanked you for doing their washing and cooking their food and anything else that you did, like dropping them off to school or dropping them off to soccer, when they thank you and it comes from their heart, you actually feel like you want to do it more. Like you actually feel in your heart like you want to do it more. SubhanAllah, so we need to get used to thanking people. The Prophet ﷺ said, he who does not thank people does not thank Allah. That's related by Tirmidhi and Ahmad. So it's encouraged that if someone does an act of kindness towards you, you should be thanking them. Notice in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ emphasized thanking people in general, not just, those who are close to you or you are attached to. Maybe you love someone, your close friend, and you want to thank her. She got you, and because you love her so much, you want to thank her. But Allah is saying, thank anyone who does good to you. Thanking people sprouts about feelings of love between them. And similarly, the Prophet ﷺ, he encouraged gifting each other. He said, give gifts to one another, for this would increase your mutual love. When someone gives you a gift, you can't help but love them more. Whether it's an amazing gift, it's an expensive gift, or it's an inexpensive gift, giving gifts to each other, subhanAllah, it sprouts this feeling in your heart of love. Just think of yourself a time when someone gave you a gift, okay? Like they came over to visit you and they gave you a gift. Even if it wasn't something that you like generally love, like it wasn't your style, but just the fact that they gave you a gift, it makes you really love them, subhanAllah. So thanking people doesn't necessarily need to be always words of mouth. Your body can be reflected to show whether you thank them or not. And I think we know that from body language, from people's facial expressions, we can tell whether they're thanking us or not. So it's not necessarily always words of thanks. It can be the body language. Gratitude can be expressed by recognizing and appreciating blessings in the heart, in your body language, like for example, smiling, making dua for the person who was good to you. You could be giving a charity on their behalf. This is another way of thanking them. You can give them a gift, but it doesn't have to be actually a gift. You can be making dua for them, smiling to them, hugging them. These are ways that you can thank a person. So in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, showing gratitude towards Allah is expressed by using the blessings that Allah gave us in a way that Allah is pleased with. So let me explain this. Allah has given you ears. Okay, alhamdulillah, you have been given ears. Are you using your ears to gain knowledge? How are you using your ears? Think about it. How much time are you wasting with your ears? How many sins are you doing with your ears? Oh, but I did this good deed with my ears. Okay, that's great. But how much? 10% good, 90% bad? You need to compare. Are you listening to the Quran? Are you going to classes and learning with your ears? Or is it just used in time wasting, or, my God forbid, listening to music, listening to backbiting, foul language? Think about every single blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you and ask yourself, are you thanking Allah for that gift? Or are you taking advantage of it and using it to suit what suits you, even if it angers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We are going to be questioned for every single organ. So it's either going to speak against us or for us. And on the day of judgment, our mouth will speak and we'll try to cover it up with our hands, and we can't. And we'll actually tell our hands and our mouth and our body parts, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're speaking against me. I'm your owner. And Allah will inspire it to talk, and it will say, I can't help it. I have to speak the truth. So remember to use your body parts to thank Allah, to praise Allah. Some people ask, why do we need to praise and thank Allah? Does Allah need our praise and our thanks? Does He benefit from our gratitude? So generally speaking, when you receive praise, you feel encouraged to do more, right? When you're thanked, you're encouraged to do better. And in fact, you feel better about yourself. You receive a benefit. When you bake a cake and your children thank you, they praise you, you emotionally benefit from this, right? You're actually getting a benefit from praise. You feel motivated to do it again. However, Allah is not like us. Allah is not like us. We actually need praise to function. When someone thanks you for something, you feel like doing it more. We need thanks emotionally. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free of all needs. He does not need us. He does not have needs. So whether you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not, this does not decrease His ability in any shape, way or form. However, it is a requirement of us, as we are ultimately benefiting from praising and thanking Allah. We are benefiting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, if you thank Allah, I will give you more. If you thank me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I will give you more. So we are ultimately benefiting from praising and thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rabb, because remember it says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Okay, we are Rabb. We have to now learn about what does Rabb mean. Rabb has a few meanings. Okay, we're going to look at the general meaning, and we're going to look at the meaning of Rabb in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when you say Rabb, it doesn't just mean one thing. Okay, first of all, it means someone who has ownership and is in charge. Okay, this is the main meaning. And that's why in Arabic, a housewife is actually Rabbatu Bayt, which literally translates into the Lord of the house. So the Lord is the owner. It's the one who's in charge of affairs. And that is why the housewife is meant to be, she really takes care of all the matters in the house, because she's given that title, Rabbatu Bayt, because she's in charge of the house and everything that goes in the house, and she organizes things and she plans things. That's why she's Rabbatu Bayt. But sometimes we own something, but we can't actually do what we want with it because we own it. And think about something, for example, you might own a car, but you're limited as to what you can do with that car. Are you limitless with that car? I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about it. Can you do what you want with your car? Okay, think about it. Can you do what you want with your exhaust? Can you tint your windows as dark as you like? Can you use whatever wheels that you want? Can you do paintings on your car in whatever fashion that you want? No, you can't. Okay, that's because there are legal requirements that you need to follow. You might own a house, but the council prevents you from expanding your house without their permission. So even when you own something, you are actually limited to as to what you can or can't do with it. So when we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our owner, we're saying that He is the master and we are His slave. We should not feel low for being a slave. And at the end of the day, you're either a slave to fashion, or you're a slave to money, or you're a slave to your job, or you're a slave to your friends, or you're a slave to your looks, or to your culture, or to the one who created you. So you have to choose what you want to be a slave to. You will spend your life working on pleasing others or pleasing something. So choose who you want to be enslaved to. You are either a servant or a master. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the master. We are the slave. So we need to make sure that we are actually doing what a slave does. And what is that? To follow what the master says. Something else to think about when you think of the servant and master relationship. Does the slave has the choice? Do they have the choice to serve his master part-time, or does he have to serve his master full-time? Think about it. Some people, they think that worshipping Allah is limited to, pray 5 times a day. I'm going to fast Ramadan. I'm going to go to Hajj. But the fact of the matter is that we are not part-time slaves. We are full-time slaves. Everything that we do, everything that we say revolves around serving our master. So remember that worship, it's not limited to the rituals of just salah and hajj, but it's worshipping Allah in an entire way of life. So that's why they say Islam is a way of life. It's not just limited to rituals. Rabb also means murabbi, which is someone that makes sure that something grows and is well taken care of. Sometimes you own something, but you don't really take care of it. You know how you give your son something and it's his, but it doesn't really take care of it. But Allah owns something and He's not limited to what He can do with it. And He takes very good care of it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only owns us, but He takes care of us. That's what Rabb means. It means a murabbi, someone who takes care of something and allows it to grow. Rabb also refers to the one who gives gifts. How much would you pay if you had an accident and you lost your leg and you needed a leg? Okay. How much would you sell your nose for? And and stay without a nose. Imagine if you had no nose, okay, and you had the opportunity to get a nose. How much would you pay for it? What's the value of just one of your eyes? Would you ever sell just one of your eyes for $10 million? These gifts are absolutely priceless. Ask anyone that's sick, even if they owned so much, what would you give for that sickness to go? That would give everything. So no matter how much we praise and we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worship Him, we will never truly be able to pay Him back for these priceless gifts. So far we've concluded that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner, He is in charge, He is the caretaker, and He is also the giver of gifts. So the word alameen, because alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, the word alameen means to all people of intellect, or to nations, or to the world. Allah is saying that He is the owner, the caretaker, who is in authority, and He is the giver of gifts to all people of all nations around the world. Okay, so now inshallah we'll do the next verse. I will try to clear this. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, verse number 3. The most compassionate, the most merciful. So this verse contains 2 of Allah's names. Remember how at the beginning we said, when we said Bismillah Rahman Rahim, I was going to look at Allah's names in verse number 3. So now we're actually going to look at it. So these words, okay, are very similar in meaning. Okay, they have a meaning of compassion and mercy. Now, although they are similar in meaning, they're not the same. Okay, they're similar but not the same exactly. If they were exactly the same in meaning, Allah wouldn't have used two words. Allah doesn't need to say so many words that are not important. He doesn't add in extra words to increase the word count of the Quran. So like, when you're making an essay and it's 2,000 words and you're 1,700 words, you need to add a few more words so you can finish this. This is not befitting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He adds in the words that are important. So every word that Allah uses has been calculated and chosen to relay a particular meaning, and it is chosen very, very carefully. So these names are derived from the root word rahim, which means the womb of a mother. The womb, think of your womb, okay? The womb protects the baby. It provides the baby with food, and it provides the baby with safety. The womb wraps up the baby, and that baby is in a state of rahmah, where they receive love and care, and the baby is completely oblivious to all this care that's going on. The baby doesn't know. It's just chilling right there. So when we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Rahman, it's referring to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking care of us through his compassion in ways that we would never, ever imagine. So when we think of the word mercy, we actually think of something negative, and then we think of being spared or saved from that negative thing. Okay, when you think of the word mercy, you don't straight away think, mercy, how nice. You think, oh my God, mercy, that means something bad was going to happen and someone saved them from that negative thing. So for example, you were going to be hit by your mum, okay, and then your mum spared you from that hit due to her mercy. You did something wrong, she was about to hit you, but out of her mercy, she didn't hit you. So you don't use mercy in the positive sense, but when you feel like you're going to get saved from something bad. Okay, so Rahman, however, it contains a wider meaning. It refers to Allah's compassion and mercy that embraces all of his creation, whether they're believers or disbelievers. And here we're going to look at the difference between Ar-Rahman and Rahim, because remember, they're derived from the same root word Rahim, but they have a broader meaning. Okay, so this takes place in this word where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing compassion and mercy to everyone. Okay, so by default, this word is not a fair place. This world, it's not a fair place. This whole world, when you think of it, not everyone gets what they deserve. It's not actually fair. Sometimes good people are hurt and they're abused, and that sometimes, evil people get away with murder and they're evil and they're given blessings and live a very luxurious life. And that's because in this world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't distribute his blessings based on what everyone deserves. Okay, but it's based on reason that the human being is not able to grasp. You don't know why that person has been given those blessings. In your mind, you're thinking, how? They don't deserve it. But you don't know the future. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the future, and he plans accordingly. He gives both those who do and those who do not deserve his blessings in this world, despite that the fact that most of them disbelieve in him, and they ascribe partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a reflection of Allah's mercy and compassion that is general, not specific. This is now referring to mercy that's general to everyone. This is what Ar-Rahman is. It's referring to Allah's blessings that everyone tastes. These blessings, however, are temporary, because this dunya is temporary. So the people who get the mercy in this world, it's not permanent, because the permanent mercy is in the akhirah. However, Rahim, because we said Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, which come from the same root word, it refers to a special type of compassion and a special type of mercy that is reserved specifically for the believers. This is a mercy that's by no way comparable to the mercy of this temporary world. If you had a choice between getting something permanently or something temporary, which would you choose? Of course, you would choose the good that is permanent. So this mercy that we're talking about, Rahim, the compassion and mercy that we get in the akhirah, it's permanent and it's lasting, and it's given only to those who strove to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they will have this special mercy in the akhirah. And unfortunately, many Muslims, they focus on the concept of Allah's mercy, and they overlook Allah's ability to become angry and punish those who are deserving his punishment. They take advantage of Allah's kindness, and when Allah does not immediately punish his slaves for their sins, they think of, oh, it's like an open license to sin more. Like, little do they care about Allah's ability to delay his punishment until the day of judgment. This explanation, inshallah, introduces the next verse, which reminds us that Allah is not only so merciful, but he's also be keeping account of your deeds. So the next verse, verse 4, Maliki Yawmiddin. Remember, we are still describing Allah. We haven't gotten to the part, remember we said that this surah is divided to two. First, we're describing who Allah, what he owns. Later on, you're going to learn about how we are asking this Lord who we're learning about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Maliki Yawmiddin. He is describing himself as the master of the day of judgment. So this verse is the third and the final verse which introduces who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So he's now given us 3 verses to describe him. Okay. Now, this verse says Malik. Malik is defined as a master, a sovereign, and an owner. And Allah is the owner and the master of the day of judgment. Yawmiddin means the day of judgment. It's the day in which everything will be brought back to life and everyone will be repaid for what they've done. It's the day in which every person is going to be held accountable for their deeds, whether it's small, whether it's large, whether they're still fresh in your memory or whether you've long forgotten about that deed. You forgot about it. SubhanAllah, because mankind, they forget. But Allah does not forget. So we know that Malik means master. But what does Yawmuddin means? So the word deen comes from the word dana, which refers to the way people are dealt with. So I'll help explain this word by stating a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he used this actual word. He said, Kama tadinu tudan, which means just as you treat others, so shall you be treated. So this means that everything and every person will be dealt with. And since Allah is the judge, he will be dealing with everyone in the fairest manner. So if you are fair, you'll be receiving fairness, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always fair. So we praise and we thank Allah for being just on that day. He is fair, because in this world things are not always fair. And I think we've heard that word, this is fair or this is not fair, from children. But by default, this world naturally is unfair. Sometimes there are people that do so much good, but some people oppress them. And there are some people who commit so much evil and so much oppression, and they, subhanAllah, live such a luxurious life. This world is not the world of justice and fairness. And sometimes we try to implement fairness, but we try to be fair, but we can't be completely fair. If someone, for example, just say, the justice system of, killing someone. If someone kills 50 people and he's given the death penalty, like, how many times can he kill the guy? How many times can he's killed 50 people? He's paying back for one life that he took. So even though he was killed, those 50 parents of those children will not feel that they had complete justice, because that person's life was for one other life. So really, justice is not fully served in this dunya. SubhanAllah. Sometimes, you do so much good and it goes unnoticed and unrecognized by people. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forget your good deeds. Sometimes you do things and no one thanks you, or no one appreciates you. No one notices the work that you're doing for them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forget. However, in the afterlife, Allah will be dealing with everyone justly. He will reward the doers of good handsomely, and He will be punishing the evildoers, in a very scary way in court. Very scary way. And those people will wish that they had justice in the dunya and got punished in the dunya before the akhirah. Okay, slide number 8. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Verse number 5. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. Aha. So from this verse onwards, Allah is no longer telling us about Himself. He did that for a couple of verses. Now you know who you are worshipping. We are now speaking to Allah, asking Him for some things, stating what our relationship between us and Him is. But in actual fact, Allah is telling us what He expects from us. How would we know what to do and how to worship Allah if He didn't tell us? So in the next few verses, you're going to imagine that you are speaking to Allah. Okay, I want you to imagine this. However, the Quran, it's the word of Allah, it's not our words. So Allah is telling us what He expects from us, how to worship Him, and what we should do, and what we should ask for. These are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words, and His words are His words are the best of words. And the way that we believe that we should worship Allah can no way ever be enough. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, what does He expect of us? In this verse, where Allah says, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, Allah is telling His servants whom they must direct their worship to Allah alone, without any mediators and any partners. That's what He's telling us at the beginning. وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, Allah is telling us, and you alone we seek for help from. So remember, we are now speaking to Allah. We're telling Him we only seek help from you. So help and assistance should be sought from Allah alone, not by a saint or a more religious person. You can ask someone to make dua for you, but you can't obviously directly worship that person. You can't directly worship a prophet or any means that is not warranted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it all constitutes shirk. And this is actually a very big problem, not only with the disbelievers, unfortunately, who worship God with partners, but it also exists today amongst the Muslims. Muslims say that they only worship one God, Allah. They say that I am Muslim and ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, and then they wear good luck charms, which indicates that they need help from other than Allah. And this not only exists now, but it existed in the pre-Islamic era. So just imagine, okay, because sometimes, you're learning something new, and this is the first time that you hear of this good luck charms, for example. When you're wearing a good luck charm, you're saying that I need help from this item. This item will bring me good. So you are giving a quality that belongs only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to this item. And this constitutes shirk. Okay, so if we are doing this, we need to make sure that we stop it straight away and ask Allah for forgiveness. In Mecca, the issue was not that the Quraysh denied the worship of Allah altogether, and that they worshipped statues. This was not the problem, and a lot of Muslims, they think that this was the case. The problem was not that the disbelievers denied Allah. They still believed in Allah. But the problem, prior to coming of the Prophet, they did believe in Allah. However, they associated partners with Him. They did this by giving Him partners, and associated who took partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in running of the world. So they would actually have idols around the Kaaba, and they would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they would also worship the idols. And that's what the word shirk means. Shirk means to give partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to not single Him out in worship. The chief god in the pre-Islamic area was Hubal. So there was like a really big statue, and his name was Hubal. And this was the Syrian god of the moon. And an image of this, so-called god was worshipped at the Kaaba. Then the three daughters they gave Hubal was Allat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. And each one of these gods were called upon in times that were relevant to that god. For example, they believed that Al-Uzza was the strongest of these gods and was related to fertility, a goddess of fertility. However, in times of absolute dire and need, they would actually turn to the ultimate God, Allah, for help. So we have to remember that, because the problem was not that they denied the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was a creator. They denied, they did not deny that. They just worshipped more than one God, which is shirk. They also believed in supernatural beings. They had a really strong tendency towards omens, witchcraft, superstitions, and magic, and they would use these methods to bring about harm to themselves or others. Harm to others or benefit to themselves. Okay, so for example, they would call upon other than Allah for any reason that sounds justifiable or not. And this is not permitted. You know, we are not allowed to do this. This is shirk. So what we see is Allah is telling us what we need to do. We need to first commit to worshiping Him and worship Him alone. And then He will give us the help that we need. But we need to do that first. We need to worship Allah and Allah alone, and then turn to Him and ask for help and ask for our needs. But we can't possibly ask the Master for help unless we have understood and submitted to the fact that we are His slave, you know, and He's our Master. You need to fathom that relationship. You have to understand, I am the servant, He is the Master. A servant follows what the Master says, and they don't question. A servant, like if the Master says, pick up these bricks and put them there, okay? The servant doesn't say, why? Why do I need to pick up these bricks and put them there? You don't need to ask why. Your Master gave you an instruction and you follow. Sometimes the Master might tell you, like out of His kindness, the Master might say, look, because we need to build this or because this is needed. But the Master is not obliged to tell you. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you to wear hijab and to wear it in this fashion, cover your entire body, do not show your beauty when you leave the house, do not wear perfume, do not do this, do not do that. You know, sometimes we want to know, but is it a requirement? Do we have to know why we do Hajj? Do we have to know why we give zakat? And sometimes we don't know the reason. But remember, we are the servant and they are our Master. So we have to remember that we need to do our job and then we get the benefits. You can't just expect to be paid until you do your job. So when we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's many benefits to it. And those benefits that you receive in worshiping Allah, you might receive it in this life, or you might receive it in the akhirah, or you might receive it in both. And one of the most priceless benefits to receive in this world is feeling content and happy in your heart. And it's called ghina al-qalb. So subhanAllah, when you worship Allah, sometimes you might not see the fruit straight away materialistically, okay? Monetary benefit, you might not receive that. Maybe Allah will give you rizq, but sometimes your rizq is not always in the form of money, and that's what you want. That can be preserved for the akhirah. But when you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala properly, the way He wants you to worship Him, you have this feeling in your heart that it's content and happy in the heart, and it's called ghina al-qalb. And not everyone is blessed with that feeling. So did you notice that when we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're not actually specifying what help that we need? So when you say, help us, we're not saying exactly what we need help. That's because we need Allah to help us with everything, in everything. There's nothing that you can be independent in. We need help in our marriage. We need help with our children. We need help with having a good job, in religious guidance, in financial stability. This list is so long. There's so many things that we need help with. So it's not stated exactly what we need help with, because there are too many things that we need help with. So when you read Surah Al-Fatiha, it's like you are reaffirming your belief. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. It's like accepting Islam all over again. And we're restating our shahada to help strengthen our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are refreshing our commitment to Allah when we say iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ya Allah, we turn to you for help and we are going to worship you. We have a slave-master relationship. And just always remember, the slave does not question the master, but the master questions the slave. Okay, so we're going to stop here. And next week we're going to finish off the surah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك وأتوب إليك.